Hi, my name is Reema Islam, and for my second assignment, I've chosen the topic of rural development and tourism, and I'm focusing on ecotourism in the Sundarbans Mangrove forest in Bangladesh. I happen to work in this forest for almost 2.5 years on and off, and my latter half, I mainly worked in a project which dealt with ecotourism, promoting ecotourism in the Sundarbans forest. Now, Bangladesh shares about 60% of this forest. I mean, it's about 10,000 square kilometers, and 60% of it lies in Bangladesh, and the other 40% lies in India. I'm first going to show you the map just so that you know what I'm talking about. Here's the map. So we have about 60%, and India has about 40%. Now, this forest is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's the largest mangrove forest in the world, and it's home to this amazingly elusive creature, the Bengal tiger, basically. The Bengal tiger, from the nose to the tip of the tail, can be as long as 10 feet. He's an extremely dangerous, elusive, quiet man eater. And a host of birds, of course, live in this forest with crocodiles, and some dolphins also come to visit, otters. It's an amazing place to be, honestly. It's in the very remote part of the country. Of course, it's very hard to access the forest. In order to get inside the forest, you need to have a permit, of course, from the forest department, but you can go with tour operators. As you can see in this picture where the tiger is standing, these things sticking out of the grounds, these are called pneumatophores. So the main species of trees that are found in the Sundarbans have all of them have these aerial roots which basically give off salt. These roots help the tree respire. They give off salt, so they mostly have a very whitish edge, because there's a lot of salt on the roots. This little sleepy owl is called the Buffy fish owl. He's a personal favorite of mine, of course. Um, Ecotourism in the Sundarbans basically is a term that is, it's a catchphrase, of course, because a lot of tour operators, they sell the fact that they're going to take you into a forest. Now, ecotourism is also rightly used because these most of these tour operators have to follow a lot of norms and rules before they take tourists inside, because as you can see, people are hiking in the forest. In order to hike, you need to be accompanied by a forest officer. You need to have a permit. There are a certain number of people only that can go in at a certain time. It depends on what time of the day it is, the year, what time of the year. A lot of factors are involved. What kind of people are coming in, whether they're older people or younger people. So ecotourism actually is not such a bad term to use after all. And a lot of activities happen other than hiking. You can spot crocodiles, you can spot a lot of birds, a lot of bird watching happens. And other than this, one of the main things which happens in only 2 months of the year is the honey collecting season. And this itself is a very interesting cultural festival, because the honey collectors that go into the forests, they wear masks at the back of their heads. I'm sorry I couldn't find a picture like that, but masks at the back of their heads, so that the tiger, if the tiger sees them from the backside, because there's a bigger chance that he'll be behind them if he's trying to come and attack them. So he might think that's the face, and he might think that's the front. So you can imagine under what threat these people go into the forest to extract honey. Now, as you can see here, it's the Sundarbans is basically it's a crisscross, it's a network, of little waterways, canals, and rivers, and so the only access to any part of the forest is from the water. A lot of villages that are found on the fringes, there are very little facilities to live in these villages. There are some forest guest houses, but there's not a lot of people that can go stay there. It's they don't have a lot of capacity. So the most you can do is live on the waters, live in the ships and the boats that carry people. There are not a lot of ships going down that way. There are a number that have you have to pre-book them, because of course a lot of people want to go. These are mostly day trips, or you can stay for a couple of days. You can go hiking, but it's still, you have to live on the ship. You can't really live in the villages as such. However, a lot of these international development organizations came into Bangladesh, and we have a very active development scene, because are one of those countries that has the largest NGO in the world, BRAC. And so we generally have a very developed, infrastructure for development, as in we have a lot of international development organizations that come here, work with the government. And some of these organizations worked in the Sundarbans, and one of the main things that happened, which is how ecotourism flourished, was to help these people get alternate income generating activities. Because as you can see in this picture, this is a very common sight. A lot of these fishermen are going into fish into the Sundarbans, and they do a lot of other things other than this. They can maybe they probably go to the urban areas as day laborers. There are a lot of other things that they do, but fishing is probably their main profession. They have permits, some of them do, some of them don't, but that's besides the point. The fact remains that these people are heavily dependent on the natural resources of the forest. So these development organizations, specifically the one that I worked for in the latter half, which was Relief International, mainly worked to promote ecotourism in the Sundarbans. So they gave funds to the locals to, build these little boats, these non-motorized boats. Then these eco cottages were built, or let's say a homestay sort of an environment. Now there are about 3.5 million people that live on the fringes of these forests, and these projects worked as small pilot projects, because there was a very small amount of people that were targeted. About, I would say, about 30 to 40 cottages were built, not a lot. Not a very large number of uh, entrepreneurs were involved. However, what happened was that it was just a starter. It was just a way to show people that these are things that they can do. There are other ways of generating an income without having to be completely dependent on the forest. So, through this project, people were trained as eco guides, they were trained as eco entrepreneurs, so they were trained in hospitality and management, they were trained on how to do the finances. The women were trained to, cook something which is a little more generic, not something which, something that they can serve anyone, even if it's a foreigner who's not used to the spicy food, so acclimatizing to the, basically customizing food according to the palate of, any kind of a visitor. um, the other aspect which was very heavily focused upon was the cultural aspect. Now the Sundarbans, because these, like I said, 3.5, almost more than 3.5 billion people live on the fringes. They have their own unique culture, their own unique norms and rituals. One of the most interesting ones is the picture down here, where you can see this lady standing in the middle. Now, she is depicting a local deity called Bon Bibi, the lady of the forest. Now, Bon Bibi is a deity who is revered by both the Muslim and the Hindu communities, which is a very rare thing. And so, before anyone goes into the forest, she acts as a protector. So, people going into the forest, the honey collectors, or the fishermen, anyone, they pray to the Bon Bibi before they go in, regardless of their religion. And a lot of songs and plays and stories are they are spun around her. So Relief International encouraged the local theatrical group to come up with a number of plays and songs and poems that specifically were on her. And on the top picture you see this dance happening here. This was the one of the ethnic minority communities. They were called the Munda community, and they had their own language, their own way of dressing, their own song and dance number, and their own way of playing the musical instruments. This particular ethnic minority is itself an anomaly, because a lot of Bangladeshis, a lot of people living in the Sundarbans even, don't know much about them. So they're like a small community which is very nicely well protected. So through this project, we were hoping that we could promote their culture, and maybe they could also, because they love sharing, their culture. And they're such a unique group of people. They had their own cuisine even. So there was this one particular cuisine which I'm very glad I was never offered, which was barbecued rat. And so this is something apparently that is considered a delicacy for them. I'm not sure if all of them have it, or if just a few people that I met spoke highly about it, but it's, just goes to show what a unique group of people these were. And of course, the culinary heritage. Now you can see these two fruits here. This is the before version and this is the after version. So this is basically a palm fruit, the Nipa palm fruit. And if some of you've had a palm fruit, it tastes just like any other palm fruit, but there was just, I don't know how to explain it. There was something different, of course, but it was also very sweet. So, the Sundarbans has its own set of fruits and vegetables, and of course the fish and the shrimp. There's so much that you can eat, and all kinds of honey, because the honey collected from different flowers tastes different. So even the way that the locals make the fish and the way that they make, the spices they use, the way they cook them, it's all very different. It has its own unique taste. So this is something that can be very nicely showcased. Um, of course, some pros and cons remain, and I took up the factor of the cons first because I like to end things on a positive note. So, you know, um, it's a very remote rural part, as you can imagine by now. Only 30 to 40% receive electricity, the rest run on solar, which is basically just one little light in the night. So at least you don't have to bump into things in the dark, or you don't have to, burn oil lamps. Of course, 90% of the population still use fuel to burn their stoves. Coupled with this, climate change events have happened which have completely changed a lot of things, like honey collecting season is now not as specific as it used to be, because when flowers come in bloom, the honey is collected by the honeybees and then they'll make the honey. Nectar is collected from the flowers. So if the flowers are not blooming on time because of climate change effects, because spring is coming earlier or later in the year, it affects the timing when honey is being prepared. So people are not, the honey collectors are not sure when they can go in to collect honey. Fruits and vegetables also are being affected because the salinity level is increasing. Even the fish, the variety of fish is being affected by these changes. However, in the pros, one of the things that something very interesting that an eco cottage owner said was the fact that, because it is you're selling ecotourism, an ecotourism facility, and given that tourists or people already arrive with very low expectations. So when you say that, oh, I have this eco cottage in the Sundarbans, and I'm sorry, but after 10 o'clock there won't be any electricity, there won't be any water in the taps, or that there's rain from this time of the year to that time of the year, visitors already expect to face these hardships. Like I said, they live very close to the forest, so they are under threat of being attacked by the tiger. But these are the things that people already know about when they come to these areas. They come prepared mentally, they know what to expect. So if food is late by half an hour, they'll be more understanding, because they'll understand maybe the lady of the house, it took her long to, burn the fuel, burn the stove, Maybe she had to go collect fuel wood from somewhere. So they'll be just a lot more understanding with the local entrepreneurs, which makes it easier for them to run these facilities. However, there's a really large threat looming in the very near future, in the shape of a power plant that's being set up only 14 kilometers away from the forest. And you can only imagine it's going to be coal run. So you can imagine what kind of threats it's going to impose on the flora and the fauna, let alone the visitors that come there. It might increase some, it might offer some work to the locals, but then how sustainable is this is again another question that you can ask yourself. Finally, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention one of the things, which is the carrying capacity. So the forest, of course, visitors coming to these forests, there's a carrying capacity. There's a number of people that should be allowed to go into a forest area. So you can see in this table that this column shows the effective carrying capacity and this shows present carrying capacity. And you can see that the numbers don't match. They are way more than they should be. So we already know that there's more people going into the forest than there should be. Finally, tourism in any case in the Sundarbans suffers due to lack of infrastructure. And we definitely don't need to add to this load by man-made issues like the power plant, because climate change is something that in many ways we cannot actually do anything about it, because if it's, there's some of it is of course man-made, but in many cases it is just something that we really have to just deal with. But issues like, a power plant is something that I think I don't even need to talk about this, but this is, environmentalists and even UNESCO has said a lot about it. This is a government initiative, so there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, of course. But tourism will suffer in many ways, of course. However, if people can understand the value of ecotourism in these parts of the country, where in any case there's not a lot of development, there's a lot of scope for selling the kind of tourism which is very, which is adventurous, which offers people to rough it, which offers a certain niche of people who want to go and experience something completely raw. They can do that there. They can live in an area where they can see people who are extremely climate resilient. And I guess that if we can do development which can help us coexist with our environment, rather than development which has its own purpose and its own, pathway, I think that would be the best way to go about it. Whatever I'm saying is highly cliched, I can understand, but it's just that I wanted this presentation to be like a small eye-opener to some of you. I did not do justice to this discussion, to this topic. I just hope that I instilled some kind of an interest in all of you to go and look up the Sundarbans, to look up ecotourism in the Sundarbans, to look up the problems that this little tract of land can actually, be having in the future. Thank you very much. My last slide has all the lovely references and citations that I used. Thank you very much.